Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for being here and welcome to a new video. Today I will be doing my March reading wrap up. Before we start, yes, I am a bit congested. Yes, my voice doesn't sound great today, so we'll just have to deal with that for this video, okay? Okay, these are the majority of the books that I have read in March, so we're gonna be here for a while. Grab a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, whatever it is that you prefer, and let's start this reading wrap up. The first book that I have read in March is none other than The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Yes, I have finally read this book, and it was just not for me, unfortunately. Yes, it is written well, and yes, if you are interested in mythology retellings, I think this is done well. It was just not for me and for this specific moment in my life. I just found the main character so annoying and whiny, and because of him I couldn't really concentrate on like the overarching plot of the story because I didn't really care what was happening with the main character. That's a bummer for me because I really postponed reading this book for when I felt like reading it, and it just didn't go that well, which was very surprising for me because I have read Madeline Miller's other book, Circe, like 5 or 6 years ago, if I remember correctly, and I really liked that book. So I do believe that if I would have read this 5 or 6 years ago, I would have enjoyed it much more than I did now. I gave this one 3 stars on Goodreads. It's more so like a 2.5-ish for me, if I'm being honest. But yeah, The Song of Achilles, if you like mythology retellings that are written well, and if you like a queer-centric story, then I think you would enjoy this one. But also, I like those things and I didn't, so I don't know. I think I was really in my head when I read this and I just couldn't appreciate it to its fullest potential. Again, my opinion, don't come for me if you really like this book. I'm not saying it's a bad book, it was just not for me. The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Next up, I have read A Language of Dragons by S.F. Williamson. This is a new YA fantasy series with dragons, with a very cool magic system, and I really liked this book. Also, I got the first edition with the cool sprayed edges, and the design under the dust jacket is just amazing. This is how the hardcover looks like, and I'm pretty sure that, yes, we do have something on the back as well. So it says, "Hear the call, ignite the revolution." This book has a magic system based on translation and languages and grammar, and I loved every second of it. I think this is a really strong start of a YA fantasy series, and I cannot wait to read the sequel to this, but considering the fact that this is a newer release, I think I will have to wait for a while. In this one, we are following our main character who lives in this dystopian world, and all of a sudden she realizes that her parents are not really who they said they were, and they are supporting the revolution that takes place in this world because, again, it's a dystopian world. There's a very big difference between the social classes from this world. So you have the first class, who are the most like rich and fortunate of the population, and then you also have the second class, which is like the middle of the road, and then the third class, who are like really poor, and more often than not they are just like exiled from their family. Again, very interesting ideas. I loved how it was explained how this class system works, because each kid, when they want to apply for, I think it is for college or university, they would have to pass a test, and based on if they pass the test or not, because the places in the university are limited, based on that, they are either allowed to keep their place in the class that they are currently at. So for example, if our main character is in the second class, then she gets to stay there, and once she graduates from the university, she has the possibility to accede to the first class, if I remember correctly. But then if they fail this test, they are getting pretty much exiled, and they are now part of the third class. I have mentioned dragons, and dragons play like a very, very big part of the plot and of the history from this world and of the story. So the way that this book is set up, we are following our main character as she is trying to learn the language of dragons, hence the title of the book, A Language of Dragons. But in doing that, she obviously uncovers some horrifying things from the past of this nation and what the dragons did and what the humans did in order to be where they are right now in their society. So once she finds these things out, she's not as opposed to the revolution as she was in the past. And I'm very excited for what these characters will do in the sequel to this book. This one can be read pretty fast. Also, the text is just like as big as my head, so you will be able to finish this one pretty quickly. It's an easy read with an amazing magic system, and the dragons are just like so cool. So this is A Language of Dragons by S.F. Williamson. Another newer release, I have read The River Has Roots by Amal Al-Motar. I also have a reading vlog for this on the channel if you're interested in a more in-depth kind of opinion on this book. What can I tell you about this book other than the fact that I absolutely fell in love with it? The writing style is just gorgeous. It is so flowery and whimsical, but in the same time it just makes sense. Like, you know, when the writing style is so flowery, sometimes it can get a bit hard to understand what the author is trying to say. This book doesn't do that. It is amazingly written, and it's pretty short. It's under 100 pages, so if you have a couple of hours free, you can just read this one from start to finish. The artwork in this book is just fantastic. You have some really cool illustrations throughout the whole thing, and on each page there's like something different, so you're always very drawn to just turn the page and find out what is happening in the story, but also what the illustration will be for that. The world of this book is a very Holly Black inspired type of somewhat fey world. I know that sounds confusing, but I'm trying to keep it vague on purpose so that I don't spoil anything. A magic system steeped in grammar and language and translation and singing. This book feels so ethereal and surreal, and this convinced me to read Amal El-Motar's other book that they co-wrote, which is This Is How to Lose a Time War. I know that one is very popular. I have not read it yet, but after reading this one, I will be on the lookout for this author because this book was just marvelous. The River Has Roots by Amal El-Motar. Next up, I have read The Turnglass by by Gareth Rubin. I always keep this one upside down. I don't know why. So what has drawn me to this book is the concept, first of all. So if you look at the covers, you have the red one and then the blue one, and basically you can read this book starting with whatever story you like, because it contains two stories that are kind of intertwined, and by the end of the book, when you read both of them, you're supposed to uncover the like secret to this overarching mystery that exists in both of the stories. Like the concept, not the execution though. So I just thought it was a bit boring, not gonna lie. And also, by the time when I had to start the second story, I just didn't care anymore what was happening, and I kind of read it just to finish the book, but I didn't really care or connect with the second one. Like, it was a bit of a flop. I just feel like the mystery element of it was not developed that well, and because of that, it ended up being a bit boring and predictable. Next up, I have The Rainfall Market by Yu Yung Guang. This is one of those like cozy Asian literary fiction books that also have like magical realism. It reminds me a lot of Dollar God Dream Department Store, and I think I read another one like this, but I just can't remember the name. Well, It also resembles a bit The Cat Who Saved Books, not in the concept, but in the whole like cozy Asian literary fiction with elements of magical realism. So if you are into that kind of stuff, I think you would really enjoy this one. I liked it. I just think it was missing something, but overall I had a good time reading it. So in this one, we are following our main character, Seren, and she has a pretty shitty life. In her city or in her town, there is this almost urban legend of the rainfall market that appears in the rainfall season. And basically the people that get invited to the rainfall market, they have the opportunity to completely change their life and basically get the life that they always wanted. And obviously throughout this book, our main character is pretty much realizing that even though she doesn't have everything that she wants or wishes to have, she has a pretty good life with people that are loving her and caring for her. This is The Rainfall Market by Yu Yung Wang. Next up, I have completed reading a series, and for this one, I also have a reading vlog here on the channel, shameless plug, but I have finally finished the Emily Wilde series by Heather Fawcett. So I have read the second one, which is Map of the Otherlands, and then the third one, which is the Compendium of Lost Tales. These are again in that cozy fantasy genre, but when it comes to cozy fantasy, for me personally, it tends to be very hit or miss because sometimes cozy fantasy can lack stakes or suspense when it comes to achieving certain things. So these books are different. I will say though, my favorite out of the trilogy is definitely the last one, which is the Compendium of Lost Tales, because the stakes are so risen compared to the other two books. The second one is very reminiscent of the first one in terms of the plot and in terms of how things are getting resolved and how it ends. So it did feel a bit repetitive in that aspect, but I didn't really care for that because I really liked the characters, I really liked the world, and I was just like happy to spend more time with these characters and to uncover more of the fairy world alongside Emily and Wendell. If you don't know what this overall series is about, we are following our main character, Emily Wilde, as you can probably already tell from the title of this series, as she is trying to write her academic thesis on the fairies, on the fairy folk. The first book, which is called Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which I have somewhere here, I think. So the first book is following Emily Wilde as she is doing her research to write her all-encompassing encyclopedia of fairies, and she has to travel to this remote northern island, which I'm pretty sure is Iceland, to just study the fairy folk and complete her encyclopedia. Now, when it comes to the Map of the Otherlands, she has to try to find a way to access a door to the fairy world because of reasons that would be spoilers. And then in the third one, the Compendium of Lost Tales, she has to gather all of these tales from the fairy folk in order to solve a mystery. So all of these are based on Emily's academic research. Emily as a character is very curmudgeon and she's very unaware of social cues and she doesn't really get along with a lot of people. So she's very funny in that aspect. So if you like the Holly Black type of fairies, the very like cutthroat and mischievous and fairies that cannot lie, but they will manipulate the truth in order to get what they want, I think you would really enjoy the Emily Wilde series. The last one, the Compendium of Lost Tales, which is the blue one, just came out in, I want to say in February. So it is a new release. If you have read the other two books and you want to complete the series, I would highly recommend you read the third one as well. So this is the Emily Wilde series. Next up, I have read a book that I don't have a physical copy of just yet because I mainly read it on my Kindle and then I also got the audiobook for it. A new release, which is pretty much the book of the year, the book of the decade, the book that everyone has been waiting for. And that is none other than Suzanne Collins's Sunrise on the Reaping, which is obviously part of the Hunger Games universe. Listen, I read the Hunger Games trilogy and also the prequel, which is Snow's story, last year in 2024. I have never watched the movies, I have never read the books growing up. I obviously knew about the Hunger Games, but I didn't really know what the story and what the books are about, right? And as I said, I read them for the first time in 2024, and I just thought they were amazing and still so relevant to this day. And I was obviously very excited when I found out that Suzanne Collins is releasing a new book that is part of this universe of the Hunger Games. Suzanne Collins, I think, said this in an interview, or I read it in an article or somewhere, but she basically said that she will not write books just because she knows that people are going to buy them, but she will write books when she truly thinks that she has something to say. And with Sunrise on the Reaping, obviously she had something to say, because this book is all about how media is spreading all of this misinformation or propaganda in like a political campaign almost, to try to manipulate and control the masses. And this overarching theme is obviously so relevant to today's political climate, but also is so relevant for the Hunger Games as a series overall, because we have seen this theme in the original trilogy. We have seen this theme in Snow's prequel, which is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And now this theme makes a comeback in Haymitch's story, which is this book, Sunrise on the Reaping. Now, tangent aside, this book was fantastic, and I think it's also because I already knew what was going to happen and I already knew the outcome of the book, but I just didn't know how we will get there with Haymitch and with everyone that was involved in his story. Obviously, I'm trying to be as vague as possible so that I don't spoil anyone, but I think pretty much everyone knows that Haymitch's Hunger Games were the second quarter quell, in which twice the contestants were chosen for the Hunger Games. Having the context from the other books on who Haymitch was in that chronology and in that timeline, this book just makes so much sense for Haymitch's personality and character and who he is when we meet him when he's mentoring Katniss and Peeta. It was just heartbreaking, and I laughed, but I mainly cried, specifically towards the end, because this book also showcases how cruel Snow can really be, and it is just heartbreaking to read the ending of this book, even though, again, we pretty much knew what was the outcome, but we didn't know how we got there and what that specifically did to Haymitch as he was growing up and growing to be this mentor for the other kids that are going to participate in the Hunger Games from the district number 12. Obviously, Suzanne Collins had something to say, and she did an amazing job, but I think no one doubted her in doing that. This book was amazing, and if you can get it and if you can read it, I highly recommend it. If you are a fan of the Hunger Games, or if you're picking up the trilogy and then Snow's story for the first time, I would highly recommend you read this one as well, which is Sunrise on the Reaping. If you are thinking of picking up the Hunger Games for the first time, please do not start with Sunrise on the Reaping or with The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Please just read the main trilogy and then read Snow's story and then Sunrise on the Reaping. I think the publication order is really the way to go when it comes to these books, because the emotional impact, if you read it in that way, is just so much more heartbreaking than it would be otherwise, because you otherwise don't really know who these characters are. So yeah, this is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. The next book that I have read is a non-fiction book, which pat on the back for me, because I typically don't gravitate towards non-fiction, but I found out that every single time I'm picking a non-fiction book that I'm really interested in, or I'm really interested in the subject matter of the book, I really like it, and this book was no exception. So this is Queer as Folklore by Such a Coward, and this is basically exploring certain mythological or just like creatures that are existing in literature and in myths and folklore, but it is exploring those characters through a queer lens, and we get to see the origins of the symbol of the unicorn or of the vampire or of the sirens or mermaids. And it is really interesting to see where all those symbols or ideas or creatures are really originating from. I also wanted to read a quote from chapter 5, which is Children of the Night, which is obviously exploring vampires and how vampires are represented in media and in stories and in books through this lens of queerness, whether it be the homoeroticism in sparkly teenage vampires or the grandeur of Baroque counts and countesses of 19th century fiction. We see ourselves reflected in the vampire's dark mirror. The LGBTQ plus community don't just enjoy vampires, we also understand that at some level we are the true children of the night. This was very interesting, and I definitely want to read more books like this in the future. So I think this year will be truly the year in which I dabble more into nonfiction after reading this book. So this is Queer as Folklore by Sacha Coward. Moving along, another new release, another very anticipated release for me personally. I have read The Ragpicker King by Cassandra Clare. Listen, I just love Cassandra Clare so much, and I truly believe that she's the queen of fantasy. Like, after I finished this book, I was truly staring at the wall because I did not understand how the things that happened towards the end of this book were possible, and how have I not realized those things until that moment. She's so good at hinting and hinting and hinting, and then a plot twist comes along and it just makes you appreciate her craft so much more. The yearning and the pining between these characters, if you gravitate towards those things in a fantasy book, this is the series for you. And I don't know why, but this series is not that popular or that talked about, but the first one was so good, and this one was immaculate. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. Actually, I do know what to tell you. Let me pick up the first book. So this book, The Ragpicker King, is part of the Chronicles of Cassie series by Cassandra Clare. And a bit of a spoiler, but not really, because we were pretty much expecting this at this point. But this was originally rumored to be a duology. It is not. So a third book has to come in this trilogy. I don't know when, because next year Cassandra Clare is going to publish the first book in the last trilogy from the Shadowhunters overarching series. So I don't know when the third book is gonna come out. Actually, let me check again Goodreads, but I don't think it was announced. Yeah, so as I expected, we don't have a publication date for the third book. We just know the title of it, and that is The Bone Conjurers. I have a feeling that that book is going to be released in 2027. I'm praying and I'm hoping that it's going to be sooner than that, but I also want it to be immaculate and good and be a good conclusion. So, tangent aside, The Ragpicker King is the sequel to the Swordcatcher book. These are both part of the Chronicles of Cassie series. First of all, Cassandra Clare did an amazing job of just like recapping a bit the main things that happened in the first book without it actually feeling like it's info dumpy or just like boring or out of place. I was a bit scared because I didn't know if I remembered that much from the first book, but turns out that I did. And this book also helped me recount some events that were happening in the first one. This was amazing. This was gorgeous, brilliant, show-stopping, unique, never have done before. Well, not really, but you know what I mean. This was marvelous. I would recommend you read this series, but I also am like, maybe wait for the third book to come out and then read them all together. Just because these two books are ending on such cliffhangers that I don't know if I would recommend you do that to yourself, but also I'm very excited for this series. So just, proceed with caution and just know when you pick these books up that the series is not yet finished and you will have to wait a bit for the third one to come out. So this is the Ragpicker King, the second book in the Chronicles of Castlane series by Cassandra Clare. And then last but not least, I have read Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. It's very peculiar, very strange, very bizarre. Also, yes, I have spilled some coffee on the cover. We're not gonna talk about that. I have kept this book in my tote and in my backpack for more than a week, I think, and I wanted to finish it by the end of the month. This was a bit, it was good, but it was also a bit disappointing, and I'm gonna tell you why in a second. So, we are following our main character as she is just navigating life. She is in her 50s or 60s, I forget exactly. She's living in a small Polish town on the border with the Czech Republic. This book also navigates themes of animal cruelty, so just be aware of that when you're reading this book. If you are sensitive towards that topic, maybe don't read it if it's triggering. I do believe that the ideas are very well explained and very well just put together and expressed by this main character, but it's also, as I said, very bizarre and very peculiar, and you just read it and you kind of ask yourself, who is thinking like this, right? It is philosophical, it is existentialist. You also have a murder mystery subplot, which I know is not the focus of the book, but that was kind of where it lost me because it was obvious from the beginning what was happening, and towards the end of the book when it was actually revealed, it just felt very anticlimactic and very predictable, and honestly very slow to get to that point in the book. So that would be the thing that wasn't really doing it for me. And again, I know the mystery was not a focus of the book, but if the mystery was done better, I think I would have enjoyed this book much more. Nonetheless, I think it's worth a read because, as I said, it's very strange, very peculiar, and I think you should experience this strangeness, let's say, with Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. I am so tired, and now I do have to incorporate all of these books in the bookshelves that are behind me, so that's going to be fun. Thanks for watching. Please let me know in the comments down below what was your favorite book that you have read in March, or what is a book that you look forward to read in April. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to, and I guess I'll see you soon here on the channel. Bye guys.